Hey rock stars, Eric Andreas here for part 2 of how to speed up and clean up your chord changes without compromising the clarity of your chords. Hey, I just wrote that jingle for you. Hey, this is part 2, where in part 1 we talked about the importance of taking 2 chords and 2 chords only. We talked about neural paths, we talked about all sorts of bits in why it's important to just 2 chords and 2 chords only. Now, why are you watching this video? Well, you're watching this video because when you play your chords, you can play chords, but when you're going from one chord to the next, you're getting buzzes or mutes and that's annoying you. Or you're playing your chords, playing them fine, they sound great, but you can't get to the chord on time. Or if you're like a lot of folks, you want to have this clear sounding chord, right? These beautiful clear sounding chords without any buzzes, without any frets. So that's why you're watching these videos. And in part 2 here, we're going to be talking about a few different issues. Still sticking with 2 chords and 2 chords only, and that's assuming that you know those 2 chords by heart. If you're fumbling with 2 chords you don't know, or one chord that you know and the other one that you kind of don't, that's an issue. You got to do this step by step. This allows your brain to understand, okay, I am growing, I am getting better at this, and I'm not practicing in vain. I know this as a teacher, you're never practicing in vain, but newbies, when you're just starting off, it really feels like that, and I understand that, trust me. But also trust me to know that that's just a feeling and it doesn't mean anything. It's not that you're not learning, you are learning. But if you do this sequential order, just like I do in my free course, the link for that's below, just as I do in there, it's so important that you learn things in order, because if you don't, you're gonna stop and you're gonna feel like you're not moving forward. Okay, so with that preaching done, let's talk about this really quickly. We talked about 2 chords because as a juggler, we don't want to be juggling more balls than we need to. We need to focus our brain on just doing 2 chords, okay? Now, I teach something in that free course called the inventory trick, and we'll just glance at it today. But the idea is this. Let's say you're going in between a C chord and an A minor chord. The knee-jerk reaction for new guitar players is to lift your fingers up and to reset them back down. And in fact, that doesn't look too bad. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, we're not talking about looks here, okay? We're talking about being efficient. We're talking about finding what is the reason why the chords aren't sounding right when you're playing them, or you can't get them on time. This is a very important bit called inventory. And so the idea is this. If I have a C chord and I'm going to an A minor chord, technically I don't have to do anything but move one finger. Okay, now this, most people will glance over this and go, so big deal, what's that mean? Just teach me how to play guitar. That's what I'm doing. This is how to do it. This is how to play guitar. This right here, this motion right here, understanding that that's all you have to do, and then doing that for each chord, taking a moment to figure out what the fingers are doing between those 2 chords and 2 chords only, and then coming up with a protocol. So if I'm going to do this and just move that one finger every time, and I can just sit here and do this motion, no strumming, no nothing, just doing this and building that into my conscious mind, meaning I'm focusing on it and being conscious of it, then it will go into my subconscious mind, and then I can sit here and talk to you and play and arpeggiate and change chords without having to think about it. Okay, so take your 2 chords, going back and forth, and make sure that you're only moving the fingers that you should. Okay, now sometimes it's difficult because you'll try to move one finger and then other fingers will want to move with it. You know, finger independence, or as drummers learn, appendage interdependence, or something like that. Basically, you need to be able to do one thing with this hand, one thing with this hand, and one thing with this foot, and another thing with this foot. And that takes some programming, okay? It doesn't happen naturally for anybody. It takes a lot of programming. So just know that. If you're frustrated with it, then welcome to the club. Come on in. The water's warm. We've been waiting for you, okay? So yeah, I want to talk about inventory, the economy of movement, which is basically what we're doing here. Don't do any strumming whatsoever, okay? Don't do any strumming whatsoever. But the number one thing that you can do when you're moving from one chord to another, here's another tidbit, really important, is you want to think about that next chord before you get to it and all the variables that are involved when you're changing to it, okay? Now obviously if you've done this for a bit, then you kind of have this down, but for folks that don't, if I see this C chord here and I'm thinking about the next chord, whether I have just one finger to move or several fingers to move, say like from the C to the G chord, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about all those bits and pieces before I even attempt to play the chord. Why is that? Let's think about this for a second. If we're jumping, let's say we're over Niagara Falls and we got to jump from one rock to the next so that we don't go over the falls. Well, it would probably be a bad idea if we jumped up in the air and then started looking for said next rock to jump upon, right? Because we're jumping up in the air, that's the trajectory we're going in. That's the direction we're going in. So it may be a better idea to size up the rock before we jump so that we know where we're going to land and all that good stuff. Same thing is true with your chords. So this makes sense with rocks because it's our lives, but with chords people don't do this. All the time I see it. They'll be strumming, they'll take their fingers off, and then they're like, now what's that next chord? A G chord. They'll get their paper out, they'll, you know, and magically they'll do this a few hundred times thinking that magically it's just going to happen. Well, it doesn't. You have to make it happen. So you go, yeah, here's a C chord. By the way, we're not strumming. I'm just doing this so you can hear it. But so you would think C chord. If we were going to a G chord, you'd think of all the notes, all the fingers that would have to happen in order for that to occur. And then you make that motion. And then you go back to the C chord and you do that over again. And you do it again. Again, nice and slow. The slower, the better. Don't think this is a speed thing. This has everything to do with getting your technique down. Speed is a byproduct of knowing what the heck you're doing. If you don't know what the heck you're doing, you can't do anything fast. Sure, you could get in a car and speed straight down the road super fast. A baby could do that if you put blocks on his feet. But that doesn't mean he can go through an obstacle course. Okay, that takes some planning, it takes some brain power, it takes some training. So that's what we're doing here essentially. Okay, yeah, you can play your chords and strum away all day, but changing chords, now you're that baby and you're weaving between the pylons. You got to make sure that you do this right. Okay, my friends, that is the part deux of this. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, my friends, hit thumbs up, share this with your friends, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. That's the best thanks that you could give me. As my thank you to you, please take advantage of my free course at YourGuitarSage.com/30, the course that I created for folks all around the world so they can learn guitar and have a great foothold, a great foundation for getting started with guitar. And it's free. Or visit me in Nashville. We'll sit down for a few hours, probably about 10 hours or so. I'll charge you $1,000 and we can do it that way. Or you can get the free stuff in the warmth of your own home. All right, my friends. Hey, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, all those places. Please let me know how I can help you there. Would love to hear from you. I said feedback below, comments below. Spay and neuter. Be kind to one another. Don't trust the man and practice your guitar. I'll see you.